This title isn't clickbait, and I really mean what I wrote there on that title. And I do think Apple really messed up by getting rid of the iPhone 13 mini for the iPhone 14 Plus. So let me talk about what the iPhone lineup is right now this year. So in 2022, Apple launched the 14, 14 Plus, 14 Pro, and 14 Pro Max. You will notice that the 14 Plus is the new entrant this year, and the mini, the small phone, has been completely removed from the lineup. And that was a very bad move in my opinion, and let me break it down. The iPhone 14 Plus has just not been selling well. There have been numerous reports about it. I think maybe might be exaggerated a little bit, but I will be honest, this is completely anecdotal, but I have not seen, I think I've seen one iPhone 14 Plus outside of an Apple store. Every other iPhone 14 Plus I've seen is inside the Apple store. I've seen so many 14s. I've seen a lot of people with the 14 Pros and Pro Maxes as well, but very, very few with the iPhone 14 Plus. Again, this is anecdotal evidence. I don't have any hard evidence to back up sales numbers because Apple doesn't release them anymore, but those things aren't selling, and numerous outlets have reported the same thing. And while they go into a lot of things like, oh, it's just people don't want it, it's too expensive, let me break down why it's too expensive and how things are working out. And the first point I think is that it finally proves Apple customers are price sensitive. I've always felt it was so stupid when people say Apple fanboys, Apple people, Apple customers don't care about price. They just want the Apple tag. They're not price sensitive. The Android market is much smarter. They buy more phones with better hardware for cheaper, all that stuff. But Apple customers are sensitive, and I've felt this way for a long time, and this proves my point because they are price sensitive, not in the same way as Android customers are. If they were price sensitive, the clear fact would be that the iPhone 12 mini and the 13 mini for the last 2 years should have been the top sellers because they were the cheapest iPhones. But were they? Well, the fact that the mini lineup was discontinued is proof enough that they were absolutely not. Now, I would have loved to have had some hard numbers to back up my claims, but as I said, Apple doesn't publish how many phones they sell or even a breakdown of which phones were sold in percentages. So that's very difficult to gauge, but it's clear by their actions at least that the 14, the minis weren't selling as good as they wanted, so they moved to the 14 Plus. And then the Plus isn't selling that well, and that's why they've reduced their output, their production, and they have slowed it down. And again, as I said, that anecdotal piece of information that I have collected being that it just doesn't seem to be out there as much as the other iPhones. So it is clear that Apple customers want something that is, at least for the money that they pay, what they consider valued. And if they do that, they don't want something like the iPhone 14 Plus, because if you spend $100 more, you get the much better iPhone 14 Pro. Yes, it has a smaller screen, but in every other way imaginable, it's better. And if you're somewhere where if you're comfortable buying a used phone or a refurbished phone, an iPhone 13 Pro or a Pro Max is leagues better than the iPhone 14 Plus. It just is the simple fact. So what is going on here? Let me explain another thing. The iPhone 14 Plus, when compared to an Android phone, it's a terrible deal. But when you compare it to an iPhone, it's actually an even worse deal. As I mentioned, with a $200 price increase, it just doesn't make sense comparing it to an iPhone 14 Pro Max, a phone of the same size. And here I've written down some numbers. So if you were to use the Apple upgrade program, I'm not going by contract price because contract price is a little bit iffy. So you've got a $39.5 price, so $39.50 if you want to get an iPhone 14 per month. All these prices are per month. $44.91 if you want to get a 14 Plus, $49 if you want to get a 14 Pro, and $54 if you're going to get a 14 Pro Max. So if you were going money-wise, a $44 phone versus a $49 phone, while you shouldn't be thinking this way financially, a lot of people do. They go walking to the store and they're like, this phone, how much is it? And then they see the Pro sitting right next to it, that phone, how much is it? And when they were like, oh, this gets an extra camera, this has the more futuristic display, blah, 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 it's an easy sell. People will either go down to the 14 or jump up to the 14 Pro, but nobody will stick on that 14 Plus because it doesn't have a price advantage, nor does it have any differentiating factor. And that's the main reason why I think Apple messed up by getting rid of the 13 mini and 12, the whole mini lineup. The iPhone 14 Plus has nothing different to offer. The 13 mini and 12 mini, at least they had their different size. They had the smaller, more compact footprint that a lot of people have asked for. No one is asking for more big phones. There are enough big phones on the market to the point where it's oversaturated. What isn't on the market is a good flagship smartphone with good cameras, a good screen that comes in a small form factor like this. It's simply not there. And Apple had it. So while it wasn't selling as great as the other phones, it still, I think, sold way better than the 14 Plus did because it differentiated itself. And that's what Apple is missing right now. Because if you look at the 14 Plus, it's too similar to the 14 in terms of specs, design, everything else. And it's very similar in terms of the size to the iPhone 14 Pro Max. So why exactly are you gonna buy an iPhone 14 Plus when you can buy the cheaper 14 or 14 Pro Max? If you're gonna go big, why not go all the way big and get a Pro? And I think that's what a lot of customers are thinking as well. You're at $900 for an iPhone 14 Plus, and then you're at $1,100 for an iPhone 14 Pro Max. So why not spend a little bit extra money and get the Pro? And even if you say you don't want to justify that $200 price, you know, it does make a big difference. When you think about it, the 14 Pro, $100 price difference. Yes, you get a smaller screen, but you get a lot more on offer. And I think that I haven't met anyone, I haven't heard this opinion from anyone that they'd rather spend $900 on a phone that misses out on things like, you know, the 120 hertz refresh rate, the better cameras, the overall, you know, stainless steel and cleaner, newer, and more clearly premium design of the iPhone Pro series to take up the larger display of the iPhone 14 Plus. I just don't think that makes sense sales-wise. And that's why the iPhone 14 Plus was a big mistake. And I really think Apple messed up and they should fix it. What they need to do, get rid of the Plus lineup, or you really need to price it differently. So what you need to do then is, instead of having the $800 price for the iPhone 14, bring that down to $700, and bring the iPhone 8, the 14 Plus, down to $800. Now at $800, you have a $300 price difference between the Pro Max and the Plus, and then people will be like, okay, $300, that's a big gap. And you also have a $200 gap between the iPhone 14 Pro and this. That's where they mess up. They don't have enough price differentiation, and they don't have enough feature differentiation. There is nothing fundamentally different about the phone that offers that either. So they need to fix that. They need to either price it low or kill it completely and go back to the mini that they were able to price lower than the 14 or 13 or whatever it was on that year. So that's what I think Apple needs to do, and I would love to see the iPhone 13 mini come back. The iPhone mini. I keep saying 13 mini, but I would love to see the mini iPhones come back next year, because that's truly what I think the right step would be. Let me know what you guys think about this. What do you think about the 14 Plus? And how do you think the sales are doing? You know, have you seen a lot of people using it? What is your kind of anecdotal evidence, anecdotal take on this? I'd love to hear that. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.